This is going to be an episode recap of the very first episode of Fear the Walking Dead. This is the new companion series to one of my favorite shows, The Walking Dead. This episode came out on August 23rd, 2015, so check it out Sunday nights on AMC. If you happen to miss this show, it is streaming in HD on AMC's website for free. Today's video will be full of spoilers, so if you don't want that, check out my other video, which is just a general intro. A 2-second intro to this show would be it's set in LA, same universe as The Walking Dead, different characters, and it is a prequel. There is a cold open to this show, and it's set in an abandoned church, a scene any zombie fan will be pretty familiar with. People living in a building not meant to be housing, not a lot of food, not a lot of electricity, not a lot of comforts of home. The first character we meet is a young man named Nick. He appears to be about 20. He's living in this church and is clearly wearing clothing that is not his own. He wakes up in a state of confusion looking for his girlfriend Gloria. He stumbles into a hallway and finds a dead body. He appears surprised but not shocked, so you still think, okay, people know about zombies. After seeing the dead body, he wisely picks up a weapon, a blunt object, a heavy iron candlestick. Finally, Nick ends up finding his girlfriend Gloria as a zombie eating another dead body. His reaction is pretty understandably shocked. He stumbles over and ends up running away. He leaves the church through a window and runs out into the street. And of course, immediately gets hit by a car. People rush to help him and a crowd forms. A girl calls 911 on her cell phone. And it is at this point you realize, oh, this is the normal LA. The full zombie outbreak hasn't happened yet. So of course this realization shifts not only what we know about Nick, the first character, but what we know about the setting. So far, Nick has displayed a lot of strengths. He's resourceful, he's intelligent, he grabs a weapon, he's smart enough to whisper when he's calling out. When bad things happen to him, he doesn't really panic, he reacts and protects himself. Of course, Nick also has a ton of weaknesses. So now we realize he must be a drug addict, he's been living in an abandoned building, he's not a contributing member of society. The opening scene closes and we have our first look at the opening credits. I'll go ahead and mention that so far the lighting, the cinematography, the acting, the music have all been outstanding. The next scene is a normal middle-class household. About 7 a.m. in the morning, a mom trying to get her teenage daughter ready for school. The blonde woman is the main character, Madison. She's a high school guidance counselor. Madison's daughter, Alicia, is in high school. She's very pretty. She's very intelligent. Travis is the attractive man fixing her kitchen sink, who happens to be her serious live-in boyfriend and co-worker at the high school as he is an English teacher. Madison gets a phone call from the hospital and discovers that her son Nick has been in an accident. Everybody goes to the hospital to see Nick. We discover this is not the first time he's been in the hospital, that he's a heroin addict, and we learn that his mom is rather tough and prepared to deal with doctors, her son, or even police officers. Her main priority is protecting her children. Nick seems to have told the doctors and police officers some of what has happened in the church with the dead bodies and the blood, and people think he is delusional. Even Nick himself starts to think maybe he's a little bit crazy. We begin to see that although his family loves him, most of them are kind of fed up with his drug addict behavior. Travis gets a phone call and we learn that he is not the dad, rather he's only a boyfriend. We meet his ex-wife and his teenage son. His ex-wife is named Liza. She's an attractive and sassy Latina woman. Chris is his son, who's rather clean cut, appears to go to a private school, and is probably about 16 or 17 years old. Like a lot of kids from divorced parents, he's rather resentful of his father. They briefly argue on whether he should go spend the weekend with his father, but he does not want to. Travis decides to stay at the hospital with Nick, and Madison and her daughter go off to high school. At the entrance to the high school, there's metal detectors, and we meet the principal. We also have our first bit of concrete foreshadowing when he says to her, "A lot of kids are sick out today, thought you might have been another victim." Then we meet one of my favorite characters, Tobias. I'm going to call him a Walking Dead fan. He happens to be overweight, have acne, a bit nerdy. He is both street smart and book smart. He sets off the metal detector as he's going through, and Madison is nice enough to make it look like it is an innocent thing. Turns out he was carrying a blade in his pocket. It looks like a 3 or 4 inch kitchen knife. She thinks that it's to protect himself from bullies. In reality, it's to protect himself from zombies. He doesn't know everything, but he has been watching the news, and apparently in about 5 states, strange things have been happening. We have our first zombie survival tip from Tobias: safer in numbers. She tries to calm him down and reassure him that if something bad were really happening, the authorities would be sure to tell us. This theme of authority versus the public will be explored later on, as well as the idea of when you know something is really wrong, how do you start telling people who don't? How do you spill the beans without appearing totally crazy? Then the scene shifts to Alicia and her boyfriend Matt interacting, and you realize that she is quite book smart. They're both seniors. He's an artist. They're in love. She is frustrated with her family life and can't wait to escape to college to UC Berkeley. Back to the hospital, Travis and Nick are talking, and he starts to reveal more about what he saw, but doesn't get into details, but does tell him where it happened, in the church. Travis is brave and resourceful and decides to go to the church to investigate. He manages to sneak into the building, but does not find any zombies, only big pools of blood. Cut to day 2. Travis returns to the hospital with Alicia in tow and brings clothing for Madison to wear the next day. Then we have a touching scene between brother and sister where they talk. She feeds him some jello, and he promises that, of course, this will be the last time that he is on drugs. Even with his problems, Nick is surprisingly likable. As the 3 characters are leaving the hospital to go back to their next day of high school, Travis tries to explain to Madison what it is he found at the church. She thinks it's just a normal drug den. He thinks it's a little more than that. Back at the high school, Travis is teaching his English class. We see that he is caring, a good teacher, kind of funny, and a little bit of foreshadowing. He is teaching a lesson on Jack London's classic short story, To Build a Fire, which is a man versus nature, struggle to survive, and of course, build a fire, which are of course all topics that the characters are about to have to deal with. If you read the text on the chalkboard, you'll also notice unionization, socialism, and the rights of workers, which the rights of the public is something that this show is going to explore. Madison is wandering around the school, and she catches a few minutes of him teaching and explaining that the short story is about how not to die, which is kind of what The Walking Dead is about. She then walks into the principal's office and sees him hunched over, a little bit more foreshadowing as he kind of looks like a zombie, but turns out he's fine. He's merely listening in to the recording that happens live in each classroom. Back at the hospital, Nick manages to convince one of the nurses to untie one of his restraints. Then while his elderly roommate starts to code and there's confusion and they move him out of the room, he manages to steal the old man's clothing and escape the hospital. Travis and Madison go back to the hospital and discover that Nick has left, and they meet a rather panicked nurse who probably knows that some zombie stuff is happening. They decide to go to the church to look for Nick. On the drive to the church, we have some subtle indications that things are starting to fall apart. She looks out the window to a playground which the day before had been bustling with children, which is now totally empty. Once they arrive at the church, we have a funny interaction between the two. He tries to ask her to stay in the car for safety, and she says basically, hell no. Once inside, she sees the giant amount of blood that he did, and he makes the comment, well, they couldn't have just gotten back up. Where would the bodies have gone? They leave the church and go to one of Nick's friends' house named Calvin. He appears to be a very polite, clean-cut black teenager. Meanwhile, Nick has gone to a gas station and gotten a pay-as-you-go cell phone and makes a call to somebody. And his sister is at the beach waiting to meet her boyfriend, who never shows up. The beach is rather empty, and we get to listen to some really nice, foreboding music from one of Nine Inch Nails' producers. One critique, either Alicia is blind as a bat, look at that text size, or they really want us to be able to see what she's texting. I think they would have been better off doing a more Sherlock style, where the letters just click up on the screen so we can see it. I also didn't realize until I was rewatching the episode that her previous text said to him, "You better be dead." Not the greatest thing to say. Then we have the infamous highway scene. Madison and Travis run into a lot of traffic, and there's an accident up ahead and they don't see everything. Cut to day 3, we're back at the high school, and the principal makes a comment as he's looking at the school bus, "What, you only picked up 5 kids?" So people are either sick from this flu-like virus, or they're dying, or they're escaping the city. Everyone is watching video clips of the accident that happened the night before, which shows an injured man on a stretcher from the car accident attack a paramedic, then stand up and start attacking police, stumbling around like what we know is a zombie. The police start beating him and then eventually shoot him multiple times until finally they shoot him in the head and he goes down. This has allusions to videos from real life, like Rodney King or other police violence. But of course, this police violence is justified. We have more foreshadowing in Alicia's class. She's learning about chaos theory and things that are impossible to control. They decide to cancel school for the rest of the day. People start leaving and loading into buses, and Travis says, "Hey, let's leave before we get blocked in." So there's your tip number 2 on how to survive a zombie apocalypse. One of the students we see on the school bus is Tobias. Madison waves at him and he gives her sort of a "I told you so" look. The scene cuts over to Nick, who's going into a diner, and in the background we hear a Doors song playing called "Summer's Almost Gone." He ends up meeting Calvin. Then it is revealed that Calvin isn't as clean-cut as we think. He is in fact a drug dealer and is where Nick gets his heroin from. He believes that he's been ratted out, and so cleverly offers to give him a free hit, and they leave the diner. Nick asks his dealer if the drugs he got were laced with something, thinking maybe I'm not crazy, maybe it was PCP or something causing me to hallucinate at the church. This further angers Calvin, so they end up going to a secluded spot for supposedly the drugs to be taken, but really he's about to kill Nick. We see that Nick has an excellent poker face because he doesn't let it show that he realizes he's almost about to be killed. As Nick gets out of the car, they struggle for the gun. There's some fighting and tussling. The gun goes off, and the drug dealer has been shot. Nick clearly is not a violent person, and he's never shot anybody or killed anybody, so he's upset. He's in a little bit of denial. He realizes that Calvin is dead. And at that point, he panics and flees the scene. Needing help, he calls the only adult he can trust beside his mom, and that is Travis. Some time has passed. He's still very upset. Travis and his mother show up to meet him, and he admits that he has shot and killed Calvin. They go to look at the body, and lo and behold, it is not there. So at this point, Nick thinks he has totally gone insane. His mother thinks he's hallucinating, but at least, thank God, hasn't killed anybody. They get back in the truck and start to drive away. And as they're going through the dark tunnel, they see Calvin behind them. They stop the truck, and the 2 adults get out to try to help him. As viewers, we can clearly tell he's a zombie. He has the blue eyes and the stumbling, slow gait, but they think he has just been shot and is injured. So there is a struggle. Calvin tries to bite Madison, and Nick, who is still in the truck, decides the best thing to do is to run Calvin over with the truck. Calvin gets back up, of course, and is run over a second time. Calvin's body is thrown about 20 feet, and they think, okay, finally he's dead, and they look over at him. He's covered in blood, half his face is missing, bones are sticking out of his arm, and being a zombie, of course, he turns his head and looks at them with his creepy blue eyes. The episode closes with Madison turning to Travis and saying, "What the hell is happening?" And he says, "I have no idea." Thanks for watching my video, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Let me know what you think of this new series. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you liked this video.